Okay, Justice Raul Gonzalez, thank you so much for joining us at the Texas Law Center to be part of our program. We appreciate you coming.
Well, I'm delighted. This brings back a lot of memories. While I was on the court, and I was on the Texas Supreme Court for 14 years, as you know. For the better part of my career, on the Texas Supreme Court, I was liaison to the state bar, so I had many, many meetings here. So coming to this building after some absence, a length of time, it brings back a flood of memories.
Judge, I'm curious, what is it in your background that drew you to the law? What made you want to become a lawyer?
Well, it was a process of elimination. Coming from South Texas, I was born and raised in Weslaco, Texas, and Weslaco High School. Weslaco was an interesting town back when I was growing up. Weslaco was, like many towns in the South Texas, was divided by the tracks. And the people who were Anglos were on one side of the tracks, and the Mexican Americans were on the other side of the tracks. And of course, we had all the bars. Growing up in school, we were prohibited from speaking Spanish on campus. So I became very aware of social justice issues and saw some of what I perceived then as some of the injustices. And by process of elimination, I decided that when you get to start to thinking about a legal, not a career, but a profession, right. I just sort of gravitated to the law, and I thought perhaps being a lawyer, I could be an advocate for what I perceived then to be some of the injustices that I saw around me.
Who were some of the leaders while you were growing up in your community and elsewhere? Teachers? Who else might have inspired you that way?
Well, I was very blessed that my parents very early on knew that if we were going to ever break the cycle of poverty, and we were migrant workers as children, and picked all the crops in South Texas along with our grandparents and aunts and uncles. But my mother decided very early on that if we were ever going to break that cycle of poverty, it was going to be through education. So she decided that she would push for an education and got us into Boy Scouts. Mm-hmm. So one of the most influential people in my life was one of our scoutmasters, who happened to be a physician, Dr. Armando Cuellar in Weslaco, Texas. He, along with the other dedicated professional people in the community who were very active in scouting, were very instrumental in inspiring and encouraging and supplementing what I was getting at home, the positive information. Yes, you can achieve. So I would say early on the scoutmasters and the people involved in Boy Scouts were very instrumental in my life. Later on, I joined, in high school, I joined the Civil Air Patrol. I wanted to be a pilot. And some of the people that were involved in Civil Air Patrol, again, professional people who gave up their time to mentor young people like myself. They were very instrumental in my life. Of course, my parents, my dad did not have an education. My mom did, but he always supported an education. So those, my parents, my scoutmasters, were people that come to mind.
A good combination of home and community.
Yes.
Sounds like. And I'm interested because most of us didn't deal with some of the things you had to deal with to become a lawyer. But you actually lived the migrant worker life for a period of time until you started high school, I guess.
Yes, we did. My daddy was a truck driver, or a trucker. In Spanish, we call him troquero. During the 50s, there was the government had an agreement with Mexico that people could come in legally for 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, or a period of time to work crops. It was called the Bracero program.
Right.
And my dad was one of the crew leaders for the Bracero program, and he took a crew to Arkansas. We went with him to Arkansas to pick cotton. He took a crew to the state of Washington to pick apples. We followed him, and we went with him. So we did work the crops. That's all we knew. But it was a great motivator. It's back-breaking work.
Right.
So when
Made you appreciate what you had.
exactly to say we don't want to do this for when the idea started to blossom in me that we could break that cycle of poverty and back-breaking work through education, I got busy and applied myself in school. I didn't, just like a typical student, I did some things well and other things not so well. But coming from that type of a background where you work with your hands, not your mind, and you work by the piecemeal. Right. You were paid not by the hour, but by the number of pounds of cotton you picked, the number of apricots, baskets you picked, the harvesting of onions, the sacks. That was a great motivator. Once you started getting to know about this is backbreaking work. If you have an opportunity, apply yourself, develop your God-given talents, and get an education. So that too was a great motivator.
What did your parents, I'm interested, because they probably had to give something up to support you in that when you decided to stay home in Weslaco and go to school. Tell us about that.
Well, we're all gifted with a set of parents that, and we don't have a choice, but I was gifted with some wonderful parents. My mother, bless her heart, sacrificed many things for her children. Early on, she knew that the best education she could give her kids was to try to give them a Catholic education. So we went to Catholic school even though we could not afford the tuition. In order to pay for the tuition, she took in sewing. She became a seamstress. She sold, back then, Stanley products, Blair products. She was an entrepreneur in the sense that she would buy bales of roses from Tyler, Texas. We would go to the train station and pick up the bales of roses and bring them home and put them in pots, and she would sell those roses door to door to supplement so we could stay in Catholic school or pay for the Boy Scout uniforms or pay for the Civil Air Patrol uniforms. So my mother worked herself to the bone, and I will never be able to repay. And I got an opportunity to thank her, but I don't think I thanked her enough for those sacrifices.
Right, right.
And my dad too. My dad, in the beginning, was against an education, because when you take a hand, the hands that work out in the field, take them out of that stream, you're lessening your income. But my mother, insisted, and then he later on relented and agreed to get an education. And I am so proud that he got to see the fruits of those sacrifices when he came to the Texas Supreme Court in October of '84, when I was sworn in. My dad and my mom were present, and they were extremely proud that all of the sacrifices of the early years had come to fruition.
Had to be a big moment.
It was a big moment for the family and for all of us.
Well, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I think this is a good time to do it. You were the first Hispanic appointed to statewide office, as I understand.
Yes, I had the privilege of having been appointed by Governor Mark White to replace Charles Barrow, who left the court after many years of service, to be the Dean of Baylor Law School, and Governor Mark White, with the consent of the Senate, appointed me to the court, and I served 14 years. And after that, as you know, we have a very, what I like to say is a distasteful way of electing or keeping judges in Texas. We have a highly partisan, money-driven system, but you have to work at it and do the things that are required of you to mount a political campaign. So I had many campaigns all over Texas, 254 counties.
Right.
And I was opposed at every turn. I was very proud to be on the court, but it's something that didn't come from me. I had the gift of friends who knew of my work on the Court of Appeals and knew my background. And you know how politics are. Everything that a governor does is political.
Right.
And Governor Mark White, to his credit, wanted to appoint an Hispanic on the court. Once that a trial balloon goes out, you know, there's no lack of candidates.
Right.
People come out of the woodwork. They say, appoint me, appoint me.
Some of them probably who are owed favors.
Yes, exactly. And the governor, after through a process of elimination and culling of the candidates, I was blessed to have gotten the nomination, and I'm incredibly thankful to Governor Mark White and for Senator Carlos Truon, because he was my state senator at the time. I was on the Court of Appeals. And he agreed to sponsor my nomination to the Senate, and I got approved. And as we say, the rest is history.
Well, and you ran how many campaigns after that,
Well,
statewide?
too many to recount. I was appointed in October of '84. The term was for an unexpired term. I had to run at the next general election, which was 1986. I had many opponents in the Democratic primary and the Republican primary. I was in a runoff. I became the Democratic Party nominee, and then I beat a Republican. But my election was for the unexpired term.
Right.
So I had to do it all over again at the next cycle. And then I was again opposed, and in both primaries. The Republicans had their own candidates, their own primary battle. I had a battle in my own Democratic primary. And again, I was, you know, through the grace of God and the help of a tremendous number of volunteers, because you don't get to be elected statewide without the financial contributions of a host of people. And I was very pleased that I was the beneficiary of winning the statewide bar poll, and I was the beneficiary of winning, almost without exception, all of the newspaper endorsements throughout the state, which is necessary in order to be successful.
Still hold a lot of influence when the editorial boards come out in your support.
They do, because, you know, as you know, nobody knows who the judges are, and you can spend $1 million to try to get name recognition. And get to know your credentials and why you've earned the right to be elected or re-elected on the court. But without the newspaper endorsements and the help of a lot of different diverse groups that back your candidacy, you're not going to be successful. And I'm very blessed that in all my elections, they were hard fought, but thank God I prevailed.
Well, let's go back to you graduate from high school in Weslaco. Tell us about your college career.
Well, before we get into that, let me just tell you about Weslaco High School. I was very, very blessed to be a graduate of Weslaco High School. We had some excellent teachers. After I graduated from Weslaco High School, I could not get a job. My dad and my mom were not insiders; they were outsiders in terms of, you know, the few jobs that were around. You know, they were not in a position to help their children. So after high school, my mother made arrangements for me to migrate to California with a family from Weslaco. So we went to California, to King City, California, and my job was to make boxes to pack tomatoes. The tomato crop was late. And there I was, you know, waiting for at least 2 or 3 weeks before the crop was ready. So they asked me if I wanted to go to a labor camp in a nearby city where I would pick apricots. I had so much drive and so much determination that I became the champion apricot picker. The Lord blessed me with very big hands. Mm-hmm. So I picked more apricots, you know, than anybody in that camp for about 3 weeks. And then after that, I went to work to make the boxes for the tomatoes. And then I ended up at UT Austin in September 1959, where I started my undergraduate degree. undergraduate studies. And 4 years later, I was graduated from UT Law, not to UT Law School, from UT undergraduate.
Yes, sir.
And after that, I went on to the University of Houston Law School. And many, many years later, I went back to get some more education. I went to University of Virginia and was awarded an LLM from the University of Virginia in 1986. So I've had some wonderful, wonderful experiences in undergraduate, law school, at the University of Houston and the University of Virginia.
Tell me, you know, it sounds like you had to work very hard, though, to achieve your education. You were working the summer before picking apricots and building boxes. How did you finance your education, and who helped you?
Well, you know, my parents helped with what they could, and I worked. You know, my story is very typical of other poor boys that are first-generation college graduates that have to do, you know, whatever you need to do. I waited tables, I delivered phones, house to house. You know, I worked at a co-op. You know. So you do a variety. I shelf books in the library. So you do the things that are legal, and no job is too demeaning when you need money.
Right.
If it's legal, we do what I did, what countless of others have done, and then you do whatever's necessary to get money. My mother also borrowed money from loan sharks. You know,
high interest loans.
Very high interest loans. You know, I needed money for books. She would go to a loan shark, high interest loan company in Weslaco, Texas, to borrow the $200-300, send them to me, and that's supplemented. And then she would, when it was due, she would go to another loan company to pay the interest or pay that loan. And it was like a pyramid, you know, from one loan company to another, plus the work. You know, I wish I had had a scholarship, but I did not have a scholarship. So I was one of those guys that made it without a scholarship through a lot of other people helping him financially.
Right. Well, you know, I'm talking about your parents a lot, but you had siblings who also achieved education.
Well, we're five in the family, and we're the first. All five of our brothers and sisters, my brothers and sisters, all five of us, children, have college degrees and some of us advanced college degrees. And I have a sister, my older sister became a registered nurse. I have a brother that next to me who also became a lawyer, a graduate of SMU Law School, who had been in the Peace Corps for many years before he went to law school, who became a judge and an assistant United States attorney in Anchorage, Alaska, where he still lives. And then I have a brother who's had a master's in social work, and a sister who works as an import specialist for the government, who also has a college degree. So all children of my parents graduated from college, and something interesting happened. As a result of our achievement, that motivated our cousins to also do the same thing. They saw that if we could do it, they could do it too. So we have many of our cousins and who also became college graduates as a result of us having achieved a college degree.
And I suspect if you looked even further, changed your neighborhood and your community. And
well, it has a ripple effect.
Right.
You know, you have a ripple effect. You know, people start to dream that they can achieve positions of power and prestige, and to make a good income to support their families and choose a profession. And we're so blessed.
yeah, it's a great American dream.
We're so blessed to live in this country that allows us upward mobility. You know, you and I didn't have a choice of where we were going to be born. We were born here. The system gave us an opportunity, and you know, this is what I tell young people. In fact, on Friday, we'll have 22 people from Weslaco, Texas, from the Justice Raul Gonzalez Elementary School that will be coming here. I will show them around the Texas Supreme Court, and I will talk to them about my story, which is not unique. It has been replicated many, many times, probably their teacher story, and open up their eyes that they too can achieve.
What a wonderful thing.
Yes.
That's a wonderful day. Well, your parents must have been remarkable people.
They are. You know, they're not. You know, just like other parents. You know, they did the best they could with what they had, and I'm incredibly thankful that they instilled in us the work ethic.
Right.
And core values of honesty and integrity. You know, they're not saints. We all fall short.
Sure.
But I'm so blessed that they instilled in us, you know, the work ethic and a positive attitude. Yes, we can.
Yeah. Perseverance comes to mind.
Yes. Yes, the virtue of perseverance.
Yeah.
And discipline. And
Now, in your legal education or in your undergraduate, were there particular professors who inspired you or captured your imagination?
no professors come to mind, but when I became a lawyer, there's several people come to mind that were instrumental in shaping my my worldview and my jurisprudential view. One of them was Judge Reynaldo Garza. Judge Reynaldo Garza, who served on the Fifth Circuit for many, many years, who was the first Hispanic to serve as a district judge in the country.
Right.
I happened to be a prosecutor, an assistant United States attorney in his court for 3.5 years in Brownsville, Texas. And the way, and his humility, and the way he treated, he was very stern, but yet he had a soft spot for people. And the way he treated people, the way he went to church, you know, he went to mass daily. The way he grew as a judge, the respect that the community had for him. So all that was instrumental in helping, because I was an agnostic during a part of my life. You know, I had no use for religion,
right.
No use for the church. I thought they were a bunch of hypocrites. And then I started to see Judge Garza, who was a very spiritual man. I began to see a side of my life that was dormant, and years later, you know, it got reignited or ignited, and that helped me a lot in my walk and in my service to the people of the state of Texas as a judge and as a lawyer. Another person who was very instrumental in my was one of my giants, one of my mentors, was Anthony J.P. Ferris, who was the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of Texas, stationed in Houston, and he was the one that gave me an opportunity.
Right.
I was a legal aid lawyer at the time. Having served as an assistant city attorney, I went to be a legal aid lawyer when Judge Sam Johnson, who also happened to be in the Fifth Circuit years later,
Right.
was the executive director. Tony Ferris gave me a job as an assistant United States attorney, and you know, all we've ever asked when you're a minority, an ethnic minority, is give me an opportunity.
Yeah. Let me show what I can do.
Right, and judge me for my acts, for my performance, and not for any perceived ideas of limitations. And Tony Ferris gave me an opportunity to be an assistant United States attorney. That led me to Judge Reynaldo Garza's court for 3.5 years. That led me to be a defense lawyer, a lawyer in private practice, and many years later, the judiciary. But the reason Tony Ferris was instrumental in my life, he was a no-nonsense type of United States attorney. You know, some people, you know, in today's world, you know, where they're all shades of gray.
Right.
Well, Tony was a black and white person. And at that time, that appealed to me. You know, right was wrong and right is right, and particularly when you're in criminal prosecutions.
Right. That
You know,
sense of right and wrong, that's almost like a laser.
That's right. So I developed that. So I was when I was a prosecutor, a federal prosecutor, assistant United States attorney, his sense of justice and right is right and wrong is wrong, and people need to be held accountable for their actions. There are no free rides, and if you, you know, it's trite, but if you do the, you know, the saying or the expression at the time was, you know, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime, you know. And so I developed that as a motto, you know. It's a cliche, but a cliche that served me well because that was my attitude as a federal prosecutor. Later on, I became a defense lawyer, and the crooks pay better than the government. Mm-hmm. So it was not as fulfilling or satisfying. I didn't do that very long. Some people can do that and do that well.
Right.
You know,
And it certainly has a role in our system.
Of course it has a role, you know. Where would we be without, you know, the racehorse Haynes,
Right.
you know, or the lawyers in this state, the Rusty Hardens and others who've done an incredible job in defending people that have been wrongly accused of crime. Where would we be? And there are many, many others. It has a role. Some people can do that, right. And I pass no judgments on them. You know, thank God they do it, right. You know, because if I in trouble, I would need their services.
Right.
But some people can do that well for a long time, and I'm just not one of those persons that did that for a long time.
Right.
Because it was not as fulfilling.
Prosecution kind of fit your personality
It did.
And your outlook, I guess,
It did.
your life view.
Yes.
So, how long did you serve as a prosecutor?
I was an assistant United States attorney for 4 years.
And then you went into private practice?
I went into private practice in Brownsville, Texas, with a criminal defense lawyer, Joe Walsh. And then I stayed with Joe for about a year, and then I set up my own shop, a solo practitioner. Many, many years later, you know, I had a profound religious conversion.
Right.
And I started to look at my life of what have I done and what was I doing with the gifts that God had given me. And I became dissatisfied with the law practice. Regrettably, in that era during the 70s, the beginning of the running of cases, the barratry, the solicitation, which is a real problem today. That was the beginning of it, and I didn't particularly like it and didn't like the practice. So I started to look at other avenues that I could make a living for my family, right. Provide for my family, and also have job satisfaction.
Right.
So I became a lawyer in private practice. From a lawyer in private practice in 1978, there was an opening for a district judge in Brownsville, Texas, the 103rd District Court. A man who I immensely respect, Judge Scanlon was his name, was retiring after a period of discernment and discussions with lawyers and my family. I became convinced that perhaps I ought to put my hat in the ring. Right. And I ran for a district judge, and I was elected and became a judge, and I didn't stay there very long. I thought I was going to retire as a district judge in Brownsville, Texas. When you're in a small town, relatively small town, you're not in the metropolitan area, you're not specialized. Right. You're in a court, like I was, in a court of general jurisdiction, where you get criminal cases, civil cases, juvenile, family. So you get a variety of cases. You see everything. And I thought I was going to stay there and end my career as a district judge. But God had other plans. 3 years after I became a district judge, Governor Bill Clements,
a Republican, no less.
Yes, appointed me to the Court of Appeals in Corpus Christi. And I stayed on the Court of Appeals in Corpus Christi for 3 years, and I thought I was going to. After you get used to a new rhythm, mm-hmm. Different responsibilities, and I'm a people person. I love people. I love to impanel juries, and I love to talk to lawyers about, you know, and have the motion practice. But you're sort of isolated as an appellate court judge. You know, you only have court once a week or 2-3 times a month when you hear the oral arguments, and you're mostly, you know, you're reading and studying and, right. and talking to staff about law. After a while, I became acclimated to the new rhythm,
right,
and a new set of responsibilities. And I thought I was going to stay as a Court of Appeals judge forever. And then some friends of mine mentioned to me that The governor at this time, Governor White, was looking for an Hispanic to appoint to the court, and I said, marvelous. So I rattled off some names that I thought would be excellent, never thinking about myself for that position, for a variety of reasons. It's a high honor to be on the Texas Supreme Court, to be the first Hispanic in Texas to be on the court. But the prospect of having to raise over $1 million for a campaign, and primarily from lawyers and special interest groups that may have cases before the court, that was not appealing to me at all. So I didn't want it. But after a while, you say, it's you cannot. Nobody offers you the position. They say, "Are you open?"
Right.
To the process. And after a period of discernment, prayer, discussions, we became open, and you do the things that you need to do in order to be a viable candidate. And then I got the appointment, and then served 14 years on the court, and that was a marvelous experience.
Did you feel when you were asked about whether or not you would be open to that prospect, did you feel some responsibility to where you'd come from and the people who would follow you?
Most definitely. There's a sense of responsibility. You want to do things right for the right reasons. Because you're rightly or wrongly, your ethnic group's going to be judged, by your performance, by your integrity, by your independence, by your scholarship, and it's a sense of responsibility to be the first.
Right.
It was a sense of responsibility when I was in the Court of Appeals. I was the first Hispanic on the Court of Appeals. And that was a sense of responsibility as well. But it is something that's in the back of your mind. It's an extra added reason, to keep your nose clean and do it right.
And work hard.
Work hard, correct.
Something I think that's woven throughout everything you've said is that at least midway through your career, balance became important to you. In other words, something outside career and practice became paramount in your life. Tell us about that and that change.
It happened in July of 1973. I was a lawyer in private practice, making more money than I've ever made. Had a condo South Padre Island, 2 luxury cars, a nice home, nice furniture. We're extremely rich by other people. Everything's relative.
Right.
But we were not super rich, but we were getting by and making, living the American dream. My wife was dissatisfied with me working long hours, and I didn't know how to be a husband. I thought that being a husband means you're faithful to your spouse and you're a good provider.
Right.
My wife encouraged me to go to a retreat for married couples because she wanted more intimate conversations. I was opposed to the idea because we didn't need it. I said, honey, we had the best relationship among any of our friends. So what if I don't talk to you as much as we did through your early years? Get over it.
Yeah.
It happens to everybody. Look at my parents. Look at your parents. Look at our aunts and uncles. It happens to everybody. But she said, there's got to be more than a marriage than having the kids in common, keys in common, and problems of what needs to be fixing in common. So she had a desire to reignite our marriage. I didn't know we were in trouble.
Sometimes you're working too hard to notice those things.
I was married to my career.
All right.
So I went on this worldwide marriage encounter weekend, and it's the best thing I've ever done because that has shaped who I am today as a result of that weekend experience. Not only did I find the love of my spouse and learn some tools that to this day we're using to keep our relationship fresh and work on romance and passion and affirmation and mutual respect. But I also found the God that I knew of but didn't know.
Right.
So For the last 35 years or so, I've been trying to serve the community, not only in my legal profession, but also we became a presenting team in Marriage Encounter.
Right.
And there's always stress in a marriage. We're never over the hump.
Right.
You know, even though I'm incredibly blessed to have a very loving spouse and supportive spouse that we work together and we're mentoring other couples
Right.
and teaching them the tools that we learned. There's always tension and stress. You know, there's some times when wheels come off the wagon.
Right.
But because we're applying the tools that we learned and trying to balance life and prioritize God first in my life, our relationship second, and then family and community in that order. Because we're trying to balance those things, I'm incredibly blessed and feel very complete and fulfilled and happy.
Well, you know, there's that old saying, the law is a jealous mistress.
It is.
And I guess that's what you were suffering under.
It is, but see, there are some who never get it from here to here. Mm-hmm. You know, you and I have a lot of friends who that's all they know. Right. And when you talk to them about getting away, just the two of you, and to look at, to see if there are some tools out there that we can do something different. Mm-hmm. You know, they either won't go or don't apply what they've learned. And they're workaholics, and they die, when they die, having good lives and good careers, but not perhaps as fulfilling as it could have been, because we all have the potential.
Right.
We all have the potential to keep on growing in our relationship with God, in relationship with spouse, in relationship with, with kids. We're all on a journey.
How did this revelation, this discovery, change you as a lawyer and a judge?
Well, I started to prioritize different. It didn't matter. It didn't matter if I was the best lawyer in town, using any criteria, if my marriage was falling apart.
Right.
So it changed me because it changed my priorities. It didn't matter if you're the best lawyer in town and you're serving in all these different boards, if your relationship with your children is neglected. So it changed me. I started to look at the world through a completely different lens, and we've been on this journey of trying to prioritize. Right. We don't always hit the mark, but striving to respect and take care of these important relationships has brought me a tremendous amount of joy.
Well, and that's interesting, because then you find yourself the first Hispanic ever on the Texas Supreme Court in a job where you are looking at the bigger picture. In other words, you're not looking at that case for that case, you're looking for that case, how it relates to jurisprudence, how it relates to society. Did you find that those tools have assisted you in that task?
Well, it did in relationship with my colleagues. Right. You know, it's an incredibly high honor to be one of 9 that helped shape the common law of the state of Texas. Right. And we don't always agree about what the law is or ought to be, but the process of working with colleagues who I immensely respect, even though we may disagree, it did help me in my decision making and in prioritizing. So in relationship with my colleagues, in relationship with staff, in looking at a record and listening to an oral argument. But the law is very interesting. You know, it never ceased to amaze me where we would come out of oral argument. We would listen to the oral argument. We would get in a conference, and in talking to my colleagues, it's as if they didn't hear the case I heard.
Coming at from a completely different perspective.
So this is why this diversity in the courts is important, because we all hear. My wife says, "You hear only what you want to hear."
Right.
Well,
it's true of all of us.
As lawyers, sometimes we hear what you want to hear, but we hear different things. because we filter it through our own frame of reference and our own experience.
And I guess if government and the judiciary being an important part of government is to represent all the people, you have to have a judiciary that looks like all the people and has
Yes.
common experience.
Yes, I think this is why I think it's important to have men and women on the court and people with different backgrounds.
You know, what have you enjoyed most in your career?
Well, you know, I've had a wonderful judicial career. I enjoyed being an assistant city attorney in the city of Houston, prosecuting traffic cases and negligent collisions. Then I enjoyed being a legal aid lawyer, being the advocate for the poor.
Right.
The poorest of the poor, where you have procedural and substantive biases against them, and being their advocate, and we have score a victory. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed being a federal prosecutor. I didn't enjoy being a defense lawyer, a criminal defense lawyer, as much as my other the other hats that I wore. I enjoyed being a district judge. I enjoyed being a Court of Appeals judge in the Supreme Court. So it's very difficult to pinpoint one over the other. I've had the gift and the blessing of enjoying everything I've done in the law.
Do you think it makes you better at what you do if you like what you're doing?
Almost definitely. You know, I feel sorry or pity people who don't want to go to work simply because they don't like the job they're in. My message to anybody is, if you don't like your job, find another one. Life is too short.
And you proved that. I mean, you did that yourself.
That's right. Well, I've had the benefit and the gift of enjoying everything that I've done.
Right.
So if you're, my advice to young people and to young lawyers who find themselves in difficult situations in law firms or in government where they don't like their job and they hate to go to work and they're punching a clock or just going through the numbers and have very little fulfillment, find something else. Right. Life is too short.
Well, you know, you're a big part of history and tradition with the Texas Supreme Court, and it afforded you the opportunity to work with some giants. Tell us a little bit about some of the people who may have been on the court before you, who you've had relationships with, and people you served with.
One of the most impressive persons that come to mind in that moment is Chief Justice Jack Pope. I've had the benefit of working with Judge Pope on the Supreme Court for a very short period of time.
Right.
But the way he conducted conference, the way he cared about the law, the way he wrote and studied the cases, and the way, what a blessing that was to experience Judge Pope when I first came on the Texas court. There are many others, you know, Franklin Spears, who I admired greatly. On the court, I had the benefit of working with Spears and every colleague that I've worked with on the court. I was on the court during the turbulent times in the, well, when I came on the court during the 80s, you know, there was a lot of talk about tort reform and the court going too liberal, being too liberal, or and now they say it's too conservative. And I've had the benefit of working, you know, with some people that that I disagreed with. Right. But so it was an interesting time, interesting era. But I have even though I disagreed with some of the decisions of my colleagues on the court, and I wrote a lot of dissents in my early period on the court. I have, you know, we all approach law differently, and I'm not saying I'm right and that they're wrong. I'm saying it was an honor to work with people I disagreed with and people I agreed with philosophically. Right.
You know, I was reading an article about when you first became a judge, and independence was one of the keynotes of your first campaign. Tell us about the importance not only of a judge individually being independent, but the importance of the independence of the judiciary. Well,
an independent judiciary, I think, is a cornerstone if we're going to keep democracy as we know it and we've known it. for a judge to make decisions based on independent analysis of his or her view and reading of the case without fear how this is going to impact in a negative way a political campaign is key. We have an honest, independent judiciary on the court, in the Texas Supreme Court. I'm incredibly proud of that. I'm incredibly proud of our judges in the Court of Appeals. There are pockets of case here and there that you hear, perhaps, that the judges are not as independent as a neutral observer would like them to be. But I think an independent judiciary, whether it's federal or state, is key in order for us to continue to have to enjoy the liberties and the freedoms that we have. All three branches of government need to function and within the respective spheres. And independent judiciary is one of those three-legged stools. Right. That if we don't have an independent judiciary, we're no better than a totalitarian state in a regime where the party in Eastern Europe for many years controlled the courts. Right. And I'm very proud to say that I have not experienced that in this country, and I hope we'll never get to see the day where we lose judicial independence.
What do you see as the threats to that are present in politics or society today?
Well, I think some of the threats are, we're so polarized right now in our society. And I think we have so little is known. One of the threats, I think, is lack of education. One of the threats, one of the very corrosive threats for judicial independence, in my view, is the partisan election for judges. I think every time we have an election, and you have to raise money for an election, and the money comes from special interest groups and lawyers who may have cases before the court. That's very corrosive.
So even the honest judges are made to appear.
Well, there's an appearance.
Yeah.
An appearance of impropriety. Right. And there's and I worry about that. And it's getting, I think, to the credit of Chief Justice, pick a name, from John Hill to Tom Phillips to Wallace Jefferson to Jack Pope before then, all working hard to change the way we elect judges in Texas simply because of the appearance of impropriety when we have a money-driven, highly politicized system to keep your seat. So one of the threats to judicial independence, I think, is a partisan election for judges.
What do you think, besides changing the election of judges, we could do or continue to do to secure independence in the system we currently have?
Well, I think education. I think if we could educate the people, litigants, non-litigants, groups such as service clubs, right. For us who are lawyers to go and share what we've experienced. The fact that even though we have an appearance of impropriety, the men and the women serving on the courts are honest and respect the process, respect the system, work to change it. But so I think education, information, all we hear is the negative.
Right.
Nobody wants to hear the good news.
Right.
That
doesn't sell newspapers.
Exactly. So you're going to highlight the abuses or perceived abuses and paint with a very broad brush, and make out the men and women serving as a judge or judges as corrupt, which they're not. So, but we have a monumental problem, I think, of education, and continue right. to talk about judicial independence, the need for integrity, the need for ethics, and see if we can break some of the cynicism or stem the tide of cynicism, both at all levels.
Right. Have you been sitting as a retired judge?
No, I have not. I've had the gift of, after I left the court, I became an appellate lawyer with Locke, Liddell, and Sapp, who now is Locke, Liddell, Lord Bissell, I think. Or
Locke, Lord Bissell,
Locke,
I
Lord
think.
Bissell, yes. And after that, I decided, while my wife and I still have our health, before the onslaught of Alzheimer's or the hip replacement or the knee replacement, we're going to travel. So we've been incredibly blessed, enjoying traveling and enjoying our grandkids. So I have not had the gift of serving as a visiting judge. I've been doing mediations, arbitrations, and a few appeals. But I'm not looking for anything. If it comes, fine. If it doesn't come, fine. I continue to get up late.
Comfortable with the way it is?
Oh, love it. I am in the peak of enjoyment of the fruits of my labors and life.
Where have you traveled that everybody ought to go?
Well, I've been to China, Tibet, to Machu Picchu. I've been to England. I've been to Wales, Scotland. We went to Alaska to watch the start of the Iditarod race. Went to Portugal, went to Spain.
You're making me jealous. Did you find it interesting when you visited other countries that aren't blessed with our system to look at the contrast in life in those countries?
Yes. My wife and I served as missionaries to Mexico. And what is Mexico? It's part of our journey. And I saw some of the poverty among some of the people, and you come home and you wish all of us who have not traveled abroad or gone to see the poverty, I want our kids to go to see and how blessed we are. I had the gift of going to Albania on a missionary trip and deal with and try to help the lawyers in Albania and talk about the concept of judicial independence when they're trying to get new models after the communism fell. And you get to see how they lived. And I've met some of the most gifted, incredible, good people, at high places and low places, rich or poor. And I found that we're so similar in our goals. The parents that I talk to in Albania and in Mexico, they want the best for their kids. They want an education. They want an opportunity. So my foreign travels, as limited as they are, there are a lot of places we'd like to see. We're going to spend 11 days in Maui, in June. So Hawaii, phenomenal place.
Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful. I'm glad you're getting to do that.
Well, there are no guarantees. You and I may not make it home. The Lord may have other plans. He may call us home. So while we're on this earth, if there's some good that I can do and make a significant difference in the life of somebody else, and if I can see God's marvelous creation, I'm going to take the opportunity.
Absolutely. What do you think what observations would you have has changed the most since you were a student at West Laco High School thinking someday you might want to be a lawyer? What has changed the most?
Well, we live in such a society that's evolving. The older I get, the more orthodox I become. Some values that I grew up with, are being eroded. So we've had a lot of changes, from growing up, in 1940 and to today. Society's evolving. And a lot of it is good. And some of it, I'm not in favor of the changes. This whole area of political correctness, where, my God, you cannot say, what you think or feel because you're going to be judged. You're going to make some judgments, But I am in the state of my life that I'm going to speak my mind in a respectful manner, And I'm going to encourage those of us that agree with me, do not be afraid to swim against the tide. So many of us are paralyzed by what we think is going to happen if we speak our mind.
Right.
And we're paralyzed. We don't speak up, you know. And so I am who I am. I make no apologies about who I am. I support others of a different view, and I want to be respectful, but do not clip my wings.
Well, it's a gift to be able to speak the truth.
Well, you know, and the truth is elusive sometimes, and we all define truth in different ways. But we can have a civil discourse, a civil dialogue, and when we do that, we find that we have more things in common than separate us. But sometimes we just focus on the things that separate us.
Well, I am so pleased that you're continuing to do that. I'm so pleased that you're doing it with the children from an elementary school named for you, which must be an incredible thing. And I'm so grateful that you came in to join us today.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you very much.